Hi, I'm Deepa, the Sleep Whisperer, and you're listening to another episode of the Sleep Whisperer podcast. Suzie Senk is a dear friend, fellow sleep expert, and another of my sleep soul sisters. Suzie Senk is a holistic wellness practitioner, sleep specialist, speaker, author, and mother. She offers integrative solutions to modern day sleep challenges and helps people of all ages get a better night's sleep quickly and easily. She offers personalized, developmentally appropriate, gentle sleep solutions for families with young children and has profound yet practical custom wellness programs for teens and adults. Suzie is known for using her intuitive, empathetic abilities and her depth of experience and knowledge to help her clients create powerful, heart-centered, lasting changes in their sleep, health, and outlook on life. Suzie is frequently interviewed on countless topics related to sleep and health and is a passionate and uplifting speaker dedicated to helping others thrive on all levels. For Suzie, health is the cornerstone of her life worth living, and she has dedicated her career to helping others reclaim theirs. Suzie lives on the island of Hawaii with her family and savours all of life's precious moments, watching her sons grow, the sound of the rain and the taste of perfectly ripe fruit. It is Suzie's mission to educate people about the importance of sleep for overall health and vitality, and she offers free introductory consults to anyone in need of her help. This episode has tons of practical information. Find out about Suzie's magical journey and just imagine if a sleep detective was starting to piece together that mystery of your poor sleep. If that's the case, this is the episode for you. And if you'd like to reach out to me, write to deepa@5tothrive.com. Welcome to the Sleep Whisperer podcast. I'm your host, Deepa. Join me and my many expert guests and medical professionals from the cutting-edge science of functional medicine of the West and ancient wisdom of the East. Learn all about how to discover your root causes of poor sleep and understand the proper tools and techniques to end your confusion and begin getting a good night's sleep. It's time to regain hope and begin your sleep journey with the Sleep Whisperer podcast. Suzie, so we are talking about this I feel like I've gone back into my youth and going to read some of those Nancy Drew and Hardy boys, because we're talking about Suzie Senk, sleep detective, and I think I want this episode to be a little mischievous, little fun, like as if you're solving a mystery actually. Welcome to the Sleep Whisperer podcast, first of all. And you've had so many different trainings and they seemed so unique, because some of the things that really caught my eye was infant mental health, yoga, meditation, of course, and sleep, of course, since we are discussing all of that, Chinese medicine. So it's a whole... There's so many different things there, and you look so young as well. So how did all this come about? What was the order of them happening?
Sure. Well, thank you, Deepa, for having me. First of all, I'm honored to be here. And I love telling this story because mostly because so many people, I think, I actually just wrote an email about this, about finding your purpose. And I had a client recently who was feeling really down because she felt like she didn't know what her purpose was. And it can be something that can cause anxiety for people. And I'm a living testament to someone who really had a very circuitous life for a long time and dabbled in lots of different things. And yet it was all leading me somewhere, but I couldn't see it at the time. And so I'll start, I guess, at the beginning. I was the beginning of this part of my story, which is that out of college, I got a degree in marketing in college, but I didn't want anything to do with it. I was actually going to be an art major, but I switched majors. And out of college, I found out that a friend of mine in the town that I was living in was opening a place called the Healing Arts Center, which was going to be a yoga studio and a practitioner's space. And also she was going to be moving her herbal pharmacy to that location. And so I went to her and I said, I know nothing about any of this, but I want you to teach me. And she took me under her wing and she taught me herbalism. And I also helped her to launch that yoga studio. And I had been practicing yoga a little bit, but that was really a whole broader, it allowed me a much broader understanding of the different modalities of yoga that are taught here in the United States, because I was able to take classes with many different teachers. And the training in herbalism was really amazing because her practice is such that people will come into her with ailments, simple things from, my child has a cough to I have a grapefruit sized lump in my breast and what do I do about it? And so she was really helping people almost like a doctor would or a pharmacist would, and it was called an herbal pharmacy. So I got a really fantastic broad training in holistic wellness from her through the lens of herbalism. And then I traveled to Europe and I studied more a more esoteric form of healing that uses tuning forks and colored lights on the different acupuncture meridians. And so I learned about energy medicine and I did that work in Europe for a number of years. And then I came back to the United States and I was practicing. And then I kind of had a different part of my life where I was the founder of a high-tech startup and I was living a really fast-paced life. But at that time, I was really experimenting with nutrition. So I became a raw foodist for a while. I was eating only fruit for about a year. And so I was really experimenting with my own body and how it functioned. And then I met a yoga teacher that I actually went to India and lived there and studied with him. So there's been lots of different parts of the story and of my own journey and exploration into what it means to be a human being and what it means to be healthy in the modern age. And all of that kind of culminated when I gave birth to my son. And he was a really light sleeper. And I was so committed to being the absolute best mom that I could possibly be. And for me at the time, I thought that that meant nursing on demand and co-sleeping and carrying him all the time. And what that ended up creating, because I was a full-time single mom, was me being completely exhausted because he would wake me up in the night and I would wake him up. And so neither of us were getting good sleep. And I also had an undiagnosed thyroid condition. I had developed Hashimoto's in pregnancy, and yet I didn't know about it for probably 9 months after my son was born. And so that contributed to this really intense exhaustion that I was feeling. And it took me about 3 years to figure out how to get my son to sleep well. And it was really, really probably the hardest time of my life. And when I got on the other side of it, I had been given this beautiful nugget of awareness, which is that sleep truly is the most powerful and important medicine that we can give to ourselves. And I also got to experience the humbling effects of what happens when you have chronic and severe sleep deprivation. So a fire was lit inside of me, and my purpose became obviously to be the best mom that I can possibly be, and then also to help people with their sleep and with their health. And because my healing journey required a lot of different pieces to the puzzle, I understood that it really requires a holistic perspective in order to be able to heal oftentimes. Not all the time. Sometimes it's just a quick fix and it's easy. But for most people, by the time they're having chronic and severe sleep deprivation, it means that there's body systems that are not working properly and that haven't been working properly for a long time. And you really have to address those things in order to get sleep back on track.
Wow, Susie, I got goosebumps in so many areas because there was so much that resonated with me personally. The whole mommy time and trying to be this best mom and feeling that your child not having that perfect sleep's a sign of you not being a perfect mom. And you're so right about the whole uh, typically what everyone says, the common belief is don't be jack of all trades and a master of none. And that's exactly what happened to me as well. But I didn't see that the dots were connected till much later. And suddenly everything emerged together like this beautiful finished puzzle. And I think I want to bring attention to that specifically because there are a lot of people who actually have anxiety, as you said about your client, not finding your path, not finding your purpose. And I think if you just stay true and let it guide you in a way, intuitively, you do end up in a space which is just perfect for you. But I want to know a little bit more about Chinese medicine, especially when you spoke about your journey to Europe and the tuning folks and just catch me up again with that. But I want to talk a little bit about that because that's something that I've never really come across and it sounds really interesting.
Great. Yeah. So I want to make it clear that I don't call myself a traditional Chinese
Yes.
medicine doctor.
Oh,
So I have training in that, but I don't practice that way. And I'm not an acupuncturist.
yes.
I have training in that.
Yes.
So from a traditional Chinese medicine perspective, if we're talking about insomnia, the reason that a person has insomnia through that lens is because they have in traditional Chinese medicine, there's basically two energies, two oppositional energies, yin and yang. And if anybody's seen that symbol with the black and the
Yes.
white, that's what it's representing. But we have those energies going on in our body. And so when someone has any ailment, but definitely insomnia, they have an imbalance between the yin and the yang aspects of themselves. And so the whole purpose of traditional Chinese medicine is to bring the body back into homeostasis or back into balance. And if you get into traditional Chinese medicine more deeply, there's 5 different elements. So there's the 5 element theory. So there's wood and water and fire and earth and metal. And again, it's the same thing. If one of those is out of balance, I'm sure you've heard of this because it's similar but different in terms of like Ayurvedic doshas.
Yes.
So and I'm sure you know about that,
Yeah.
but in the doshas we have pitta and kapha and vata.
Yeah.
And in the same way with the Chinese 5 elements, we're trying to bring those things into balance. And so if one of them is out of balance, then that can cause different issues in the body. And then
the same with the whole yin and yang is the same as the ha and ta, or the prana flow in the body in terms of yogic perspective. The ida and the pingala, the masculine and the feminine, the hot and the cool. So there's so many. I think it all overlaps so beautifully.
That's one of the things early on in my studies and in what drove me was really trying to understand the synthesis between these different systems and how they were different and how they were similar.
Yes.
And where the overlap lies, because I'm just fascinated by all the different systems. And I think that people can get caught up in this system says this, but this system says this, and they're contrary. And you have to kind of change the way that you think about things from a reductionist perspective to a holistic perspective in order to be able to hold the truth of all of them and see how they make sense in your life. And I really love that these ancient systems correlate with each other in profound ways. And that's because people a long time ago had a lot of time to be quiet and to observe nature and the nature of themselves. And the fundamental truths of the nature of ourself is universal, you know, whether you were born in ancient China or ancient India, human bodies, you know, work the same regardless. And so that's why they have systems that overlap in such a beautiful way.
It's beautiful, and I get goosebumps with so many things that you say, because it's like I'm looking in the mirror today, because there's so much. I too believe that people shouldn't look at it as the reductionist approach, and that everything can be true and when you try to find those intersections, it actually, and the picture that emerges for anybody is so perfect. And it gives so many clues as to understanding what's happening inside of that person. But just tell me a little bit about your journey to Europe, and what was that training actually? So I've never heard about that.
Yeah, so there's several different people who train in sound healing. A lot of people have heard of Jonathan Goldman. My teacher is a man named Fabian Maman, and he developed something called Tamado. And so Tamado it's not just one thing. So there is a modality that we're taught that uses tuning forks and colored lights on different acupuncture meridians. And there's actually several different techniques that use that. There's also another technique that uses big, long sound tubes over different chakras with different frequencies of light on the different chakras. He also teaches as part of this whole way of, it's almost like a way of being, you know, in the same way that a person might have trained in a martial arts practice ages ago, and part of that might have been, you know, sitting out in the freezing snow and learning how to be okay with that, and another part of it might have been, you know, learning how to kick through a brick. So this has many different layers and parts of it. So another part of it was a specific kind of qigong that he developed, where it has different stages, but the first stage you use different movements that stretch and move energy through the acupuncture meridians, and you focus on different colors and different sounds that correlate with that. So lots of different parts to this.
So, I mean, these are all magical modalities, come to think of it. It might be something that somebody has taken different aspects and put it together in their own intuitive way, but every part of that is so magical. Um, and where do you live now? Because that space, and I want to read this out because I read this, that you live on an island with your family and you savor all of life's precious moments, watching your son grow, the sounds of the rain, and the taste of perfectly ripe fruit. This is an idyllic living. Are you still living in this island? And do you feel that this approach, because you did talk about for a little while being caught up in a technological space, fast-paced living, and then now it seems to be something which is exactly the opposite of that. So do you feel this contributed not just to better sleep, but also to you living more in tune with nature and spiraling you towards a better path where you're more intuitive and you're definitely living a more sacred life, which then helps you move towards your purpose and your vision?
I live on the island of Kauai, and which most people, when they hear it, think that it's just, you know, the most wonderful thing. And I absolutely love it here. It's very isolated. The Pacific Islands are the most isolated place on the entire planet. So to go anywhere else, it's far, you know, and I live out in the country. Like, I have roosters that if it wasn't raining right now, they would be crowing and you might be able to hear them. And to answer your question, I think that anyone, anywhere can drop into a space where they can feel the pulse of life. I don't think that it's necessary to be anywhere in particular to do that, but it definitely helps, right? Because if you're living in an apartment building in New York City or in Mumbai, way, way, way high up, the air is not fresh to breathe. And, you can even just feel, I remember trying to sleep in New York City several years ago in a friend's apartment. And the entire night I could just feel the whole earth, the whole building underneath me just pulsing and shaking the entire time with the energy and the electricity and everything that was running through the city. And I'm really, really sensitive. So it's hard for me to be in places like that. And it's much easier to be here. But at the same time, I miss the culture of, things that I can do on the mainland when I'm not here. So it's, anywhere you go, in any situation we find ourselves in, there's always wonderful aspects of it and things that are challenging. So it's the same here. What I will say is that I think that this might lead into another question that you would ask me. And it kind of alludes to what I said before, which is that when we lived thousands and thousands of years ago, people lived a much slower pace of life, and it allowed them to be more in tune with the rhythms of nature. And for a person's sleep, I think that the main reason why people aren't sleeping well today, why we have such an epidemic of insomnia and sleep deprivation, is because people are out of touch with the harmonies, the rhythms of nature and their own biological rhythm. And so that's the number one thing that I would suggest to anyone listening to this, if you're having difficulty with your sleep, is really getting back in tune with the rhythms of nature. And what I mean by that is the cycle of light and dark, because we have our circadian rhythm, which is regulated by the light that comes into our eyes. And if you think about it, when we lived thousands and thousands of years ago, before the advent of electricity, most of us lived in little huts, and we would wake up when the sun came up and we would be outdoors, either hunting or farming all day long or foraging. And then when the sun would set, we would start to feel sleepy. Maybe we would have a campfire or a torchlight, but that's it. And then we would go to sleep unless we were on night watch to protect ourselves from the saber-toothed tiger or whatever it was. And then we would wake up and do that over and over again. So back in that era, I gander that people really didn't have issues with their sleep because they were so synced up with the rhythms of nature. But now we have so much unnatural light, and our fast-paced lives don't allow us to even feel what our body's messages are telling us. Hey, I'm actually really exhausted right now. Maybe I shouldn't stay up for the 11 o'clock news or whatever it happens to be. And so we override what our body is trying to tell us on a regular basis. And that's really what's causing our sleep problems.
So true, Suzie. And I do want us to have a little bit of time to, let's say that somebody came to you as Suzie Senk, the sleep detective. How would you actually start to break down the mystery and solve this puzzle of their poor sleep? Where would you begin?
Well, it's easy. It's one thing, like, hey, you shouldn't be eating that chocolate ice cream before bed every night, something like that. Yeah. But a lot of times there's a lot of different things going on that are contributing to why they're not sleeping. And so in order to address it holistically, we have to look at the whole picture. So I require my clients to fill out a very long, I think it's like 29 pages intake form. Mm-hmm. And then I also request that they give me every other piece of medical data that they have from anyone else that they've seen in the last 10 years, because all of that informs how we work together. And so the first thing that we're always going to do is we're going to look at what's called their sleep hygiene. So we're going to make sure that they're doing everything that they possibly can that they can control in their routine to optimize their sleep. That's number one. And that's, you can look up sleep hygiene. There's countless articles on it, and you can do that for yourself. You can dial that in yourself. And if you do all of that and then you're still having difficulty with your sleep, that's when we start to dig deeper and we start to look at what else is going on. So for some people, it could be that they have a schedule, maybe they're a night shift worker and that's just something that they have to live with. And so the work might be, how do we optimize their sleep given that that's their situation? Another person might be under extraordinary stress, unusual stress. Another person might have chronic stress that has contributed to physiological imbalances in their body. Another person might have one or several different issues going on a physiological level that needs to be addressed. So like for me, it was the thyroid. For another person, it might be that they have mold toxicity. For another person, it might be that they have an issue with parasites. There's so many different, because sleep affects everything and everything affects sleep, you really can have anything going on in a person's life that could be contributing to the reasons that they're not sleeping. So in order to figure out how to get a person to sleep, we kind of have to go through the process of weeding through everything and making sure that we look at all the different things that are contributing to it. And like I said, sometimes it's a really quick fix and they cut out that chocolate ice cream and within a week they're sleeping really well. For other people who have chronic health issues that are contributing to the reason that they're not sleeping, it may take months or even years of kind of, turning the health, which has kind of been going in one direction, back into a more positive, healthy direction. And that can take a while for the body to heal itself. And here's the tricky thing, because our body does its healing work while we sleep at night. It's kind of this chicken and egg thing, because if we're not sleeping well, then our body can't heal itself. And if our body can't heal itself, then we're not going to sleep well. So it can be a frustrating process for people. And I want to say that it's absolutely possible, regardless of what's going on with your health, to turn that ship around and to feel better.
Yeah, and I think what you said was that every person, there's this different permutation and combination of the triggers which is contributing to their poor sleep, and finding that pattern is tricky, but it's definitely possible, because I know a lot of people who struggle with poor sleep for 10 years and they feel that some feel that there's nothing wrong in it and they just go on however they are. They don't look deeper. And that's, I think, a little, you need a bit of concern with that, because long-term sleep deprivation definitely has so many challenges as well. But I think if somebody felt that they do want to change, I don't think it's impossible for anybody. And you're offering people hope as well. And that's really important. So, okay, so when you found out and you figured out somebody and you've looked into this deep intake form, by the way, my intake form is also 29 pages, I think. But after this deep intake process and you looking through that and understanding really what's happening within that person, where do you actually begin to do the work? So do you combine all these modalities that you've trained in for everybody? Do you have, do you choose in a specific way, just like you look at these root causes? Is the solution also a little tailor-made, unique to each person?
Absolutely, completely tailor-made. So anxiety and sleep deprivation very commonly go hand in hand.
Yes.
And so I think that it's really important to be aware of that in how we work with clients. And I think very, very early on in my career, I would just tell them everything and try to give them all the entire picture all at once, because I wanted to make sure that I was giving them the value that they they deserve.
Yeah.
And what I've learned is that that's really not helpful for someone who has sleep deprivation, because their mental cognitive abilities are not online, and they can't even really process what I'm sharing with them, and it just feels overwhelming and makes things worse. So normally what I'll do is I will look at the whole big picture with them, and then I will narrow in on 3 to 5 steps of things that I want them to do, action steps that I want them to take immediately. And those will be the things that I think for them will bring them the greatest return on investment.
Yeah.
It will make them an impact for them immediately. And usually, very often, that will involve getting blood work done through their PCP, because I'm not a doctor. I don't run blood work, but I can work in tandem with a doctor in order to tell them what I think that they should be looking for.
Yeah.
And then I can go over their labs with them once they get them back, and give them maybe a different lens than their traditional doctor is going to give them, because as you well know, I'm sure, there's a very different way of looking at labs from a functional perspective than from the traditional medical perspective. So a traditional medical doctor might be telling you, you're completely fine, you have no problems. But when you look at it through the functional lens, you'll see, well, it might be within normal range, but that doesn't mean that it's optimal. And if it's not optimal, you really might be feeling horrible.
Yeah,
so
can you just talk a little bit about that, because it's quite interesting, and I think it's important to, maybe you could share a couple of examples of how the lab work actually revealed to you something which was preventing somebody from having good sleep, and then by looking at those labs you changed and you had some intervention, gave them some guidelines or frameworks which actually helped to solve their sleep. So maybe you could talk us through 1 or 2 scenarios like that.
Sure, I've got 2 right off the top of my head. So I think the 2 that come up the most are thyroid and vitamin D levels. So oftentimes we have a thyroid issue that a doctor will look at your TSH level, and they will say, as long as you have under between basically like 0.5 and 5, you're normal.
Yeah.
But for most people, if they have a TSH anything above 2.5 or 3, they're going to feel completely horrible, but that's within normal range. And the reason for that is because when they tested the subgroup of people that they were testing for thyroid health, they included in that subset people who had thyroid disease, which is just, it is what it is, but that's why.
Yeah.
So you have to know that if you have really low energy, if you have cold hands and feet, if you have brittle hair or brittle nails, if you have a sluggish metabolism, those are all signs that you could have a thyroid issue. And if you should go get your TSH tested, and if it comes back, and even if it's in a low normal range, if you have those things, you should probably also get tested for your antibody levels tested, because you can have a completely normal TSH, but you can still have Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease of the thyroid gland, which indicates something else. But most doctors will only test your TSH level. They will never test your antibodies unless your TSH is off.
Yeah.
You can have a normal TSH, but you can still have elevated antibodies.
So how does that, if somebody is off the optimal range, how does that play out in terms of their sleep? Does their sleep look a specific way?
It's different for different people, because normally there's your adrenal glands, and then there's your thyroid, and then there's your female hormones as a woman, and all 3 of those things function. They have like an interrelatedness. So it really depends on what else is going on for you. But oftentimes for people, it looks like them being completely exhausted in the morning, not being able to get out of bed, really having no energy or low energy throughout the day. And then when it comes time to go to sleep at night, they're wired and they can't fall asleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then obviously the trying to lose weight, can't lose weight, anxiety, mood swings, all of those things can
And
also
then the
fall.
lack of sleep, increasing insulin resistance, throwing off their weight again. It's a frustrating cycle for sure. Yeah, so vitamin D for sure, especially given winter in very cold places. A lot of people who live in places like Boston, and then the winter gets so chilly. So, how does vitamin D actually? And I think potentially everybody on the planet is deficient at some point or the other. So, how does that look like in terms of sleep? Is it the
Okay.
lack of sleep itself?
So again, we talked about how we used to live thousands of years ago. And when we were out, so normally we get vitamin D, plenty of vitamin D from the sun when we're outside all day long. But now we live indoors, and most of us aren't outdoors nearly as much as we need to be in order to absorb the levels of vitamin D that we need. So again, if you get your vitamin D tested, your doctor will tell you that anything over 30 is normal. But in order for it to be optimal, where you're going to have enough energy in order to get into the deepest stages of sleep, because you need to have optimized vitamin D in order to get into the deepest stages of sleep, your vitamin D needs to be between 60 and 80. And if it's lower than that, or if it's higher than that, you can have a whole host of symptoms, including headaches and not being able to sleep well. So it's really important to get your vitamin D optimized, but there's another piece to that, which is that there's a correlation between the B vitamins that would naturally be occurring in the gut if you had optimized vitamin D. So you also have to initially supplement with a balanced B vitamin in order to get that recolonized in the gut. And then it'll be good to go once you have your vitamin D optimized.
Makes so much sense. And I've discovered one more aspect in this, Susie, since we're having this fascinating vitamin D conversation, is that there are some people who have challenges like methylation, liver detoxification, myself included, who cannot tolerate the high dose of vitamin D. So when you're given this very high dose, like 60,000 at one time, that makes me lose sleep the whole night. And it takes a few days of supporting the liver before it actually starts to ease off. So what you said about the too high also can trigger terrible sleep, and so many people are being given these very high doses. Some of them can't always tolerate it. So that was great information, and I want to know Susie's favorite sleep meals and sleep supplements.
Okay, I just wanted to respond to what you said because I think that
Yes.
that's so important, and I'm so
Yeah.
glad that you said that.
Yes.
So sometimes people with chronic sleep issues are people who are hypersensitive in general. And
Yes.
so I would never suggest starting someone out with
Yes.
60,000 IUs of vitamin D.
Yeah.
And if you could try supplementing, again, you have to do it in a certain way. And so I wouldn't recommend just taking it nilly-willy anyways, because it is a hormone.
Yes.
But a person could start with 1,000 milligrams per day
Mm,
and see if they can tolerate that, but they may need to drop down lower than that just to get their body used to it, and like you
yes.
said, do all the liver support and things like that prior
Yeah.
to that.
For sure. I think it's being, there's a lot of these loose recommendation of 60,000, where I always think it's important to go 500,000, 2,000, 10,000, gradually, always slow and low. That makes so much sense.
And also to get your level tested as you're doing
Yes,
that,
yes,
because
yes.
the point is to keep it within that range,
Yeah.
not to have it skyrocket and feel horrible,
Yes,
so it's
yes.
really important to the
That's an
testing.
important thing as well, because I think a lot of people just take that. I know somebody who just, every time he gets a pain in his knee, he never checks and he just starts taking high dose vitamin D. And I don't think you should guess that this has to do. Maybe at one point your pain might have had to do with those, right? But it need not be the case. That's a very valid point, Susie. Okay, so Susie's signature sleep meals and sleep supplements.
So I have to preface this by saying that we are all unique. So what I do and what works for me may not be the same thing that works for you. Here's what I do. So number one, most important thing, keeping a solid routine. So if I am a bad girl and I stay up too late because I want to watch something with my fiance or something like that, I know that it probably means that I'm not going to sleep well that night, and it's going to have an effect for several days thereafter, because then I will be overtired the next day. So I'll go to bed earlier, but that might mean that I'll wake up earlier. So it's really important for me, because I am really sensitive, to keep a consistent schedule, which means that I go to bed around the same time and I wake up around the same time. It's also really important for me that I get exercise. I notice a really, really big difference if I go through my day and I don't carve out a little bit of time to go for a quick jog or do some yoga or something like that, versus when I do. I get much better sleep and much deeper sleep if I exercise. If you're someone though who is chronically sleep deprived and who has really low energy, I don't recommend exercise, because it's just going to stress your system out more. So it's really important that you get a good foundation of energy and health before you try to exercise. And then I always start my day out with a fresh glass of water and a little bit of fresh squeezed lemon juice and some real salt, which is a natural mineral salt that has a lot of it has a high mineral content. And I drink that first thing before I eat anything. And then I wait a while because I don't get hungry first thing in the morning. So I don't eat my first meal until 10 or 11. What I was saying about making sure that you get enough minerals is really important, because unfortunately our food system is depleted in minerals. So we don't have enough naturally occurring minerals in our food. Even if you ate perfectly, if you ate all organic, local, everything, you still wouldn't be getting enough nutrients in your food. So it's really important to supplement with a really high quality multivitamin. Because of my thyroid, I also take selenium every day. And then I also can run anemic. So I have to make sure that I supplement with enough good iron and vitamin C, but not at the same time as the multi, because those can be, it doesn't allow you to absorb the other nutrients if you take your iron at the same time as your multivitamin. So I make sure that I take that. And then I also just moderate my stress and make sure that I don't take on too much, and that I manage my energy level throughout the day. I'm fortunate now. I used to have a time in my life where midday I would absolutely tank and I would feel almost narcoleptic. But now I'm at a place where I have like a pretty good stream of energy all day long. And then I just make sure that I take breaks, I stretch, I get enough water in my day. And then in the evening, I dim the lights and make sure that I'm not exposing myself to a lot of, blue, unnatural light at night. My family knows that I'm like a light Nazi, and we have amber and red lights only after dark. And I try to, as much as possible, really only expose myself to quiet, mellow things in the evening. I avoid having any sort of stressful conversation in the night. I don't do work on my computer that's going to, amp me up or get me in a mental space. And then I always take a hot shower before bed. And the reason why this is important, again, if we go back to how we used to live thousands of years ago, when the sun sets, the earth cools. And so it's a signal to our body that it's time to sleep. So if you take a hot shower or a hot bath before bed, it will elevate your internal body temperature temporarily, but then it'll make it drop really rapidly. And so if you can time getting into bed with that drop in temperature, it's a really supportive way to help you get to sleep. And the other thing that I do, which I just started doing and I love so much, is I sleep on I have a silk pillowcase. which is really good. It's natural. All my bedding is natural, but the silk is supposed to help with just the smoothness on your face, and I like the way it feels. So
I know I've been eyeing some silk pillowcase on Instagram, and now you prompted me to go find it and get myself one. I
it's
want to
wonderful.
quickly ask you two things. I know we're a bit tight on time, but one was that you mentioned iron. Now, is it, do you eat plant-based, or are you, because you mentioned raw food? So are you eating mostly plant-based? So I do like to look at the intersection, as in the iron, I feel, is a big piece for everybody. So I just want to get your perspective on whether there's this link between diet, to all diets offer you adequate optimal iron, or is that why you need to supplement? That's one question. And then, of course, if you could just tell me a little bit about what does Susie's dinner look like?
Sure. So I am not a vegetarian or a vegan or any of the other things that I have done before. I'm an omnivore now.
Yeah.
And that happened as a result of the thyroid disease, because
Yeah.
according to the research that I've done, for people who have thyroid
Yeah.
issues, not including meat in their diet is it's not the best way to heal the thyroid.
Yeah.
And there's other people that will say differently. And like I said, I've been experimenting with diet my whole life. So I don't have any, what I want to say to people about their diet is this: you have to listen to your body and do what
Yes.
feels right for you and experiment. And for when I was a vegan, that was absolutely the right thing for me. When I was a raw foodist, that was absolutely the right thing for me for that particular moment in time for me. I'll tell you the reason that I stopped being a raw foodist, just because I think it's relevant and interesting. So I was a raw foodist at the same time that I was the founder of a high-tech startup. And I was going into San Francisco and going to these really high-level business meetings for dinner almost every night. And I would have to call the chefs in advance and say, hi, can you please prepare a raw meal for me, because I don't eat cooked food? And it just became obnoxious for me to have to do that all the time. I felt bad imposing on the chefs.
Yeah.
And also, eating raw is wonderful if you don't have a lot of demands on your life, because it really changes the way that you perceive reality. I don't know how else to say that, but it's not very grounding. And at that time in my life, I really realized that I just needed to have more groundedness in my life. And so I moved to veganism from being a raw foodist. And I definitely feel like, because I'm an animal lover, there are parts of eating meat that are challenging for me, but I know that it's best for my body. And I'm also part Native American, so I'm able to draw on the awareness of honoring the animal and honoring the circle of life, and seeing myself as a human being holistically from that perspective. That makes it feel okay for me. And there was another question.
What you just said resonates with me so much, because there are parts of me which feel exactly the same way. But I think it is important that whatever be the diet, that you listen from a space of what is your body actually telling you.
That's right. Yeah, and be where you are, rather than having, there's so many, the reason that there are so many fad diets coming and going all the time is because if there was one specific way of eating, everyone would do that. But depending on what's going on for a person in the stage of their health, depending on their ancestry, their genetics, where they live now, there's so many different factors that play into what we eat and how we eat. I live in a tropical climate. If I was in, Scandinavia right now, my diet would probably look differently than it does where I am, because of the weather, and how that made my body feel.
Yeah. So just tell me quickly, what does dinner look like for you?
Yeah. So I try to eat a anti-inflammatory diet as much as possible in order to support my health and specifically my thyroid. So my stepson has a gluten and a dairy and a soy allergy. So in our household, we generally avoid gluten, dairy, and soy anyways. So it oftentimes looks like having some sort of healthy meat, grass-fed, organic, pasture-raised, all of those things. And then a whole lot of leafy green vegetables, whatever I can get my hands on. And then some sort of carbohydrate, whether it's a potato or a gluten-free pasta or something like that. So I always want to make sure that my meals are balanced and that the blood sugar balance is important. And I am so sensitive to that. So like last night I was eating some lentils and with kale and with rice, and for whatever reason I put too much rice in my bowl. And so what was left at the end was like I ate all the lentils and I ate the kale, but I didn't eat all the rice because I could just feel as I was eating that would be too much starch for my body and it wouldn't feel right to me and I wouldn't feel good afterwards.
Yeah. And if I had that full bowl of rice, I would be awake at midnight. Suzie, I know that I wish we had more time, but that was a great conversation. So just complete our mantra for us. If sleep is the new medicine, then?
If sleep is the new medicine, then I would ask anyone listening to really hear that and to prioritize sleep in your life, because it is absolutely the number one thing that you can do for your health and for your life in general. Any goal that you have, anything that you want to accomplish, you will be better armed to accomplish it if you have a good foundation of sleep. So if it's you want to attract someone into your life, you want love in your life, you want to get the next raise, you want to win the next race, you want to be a better parent, all of these things require the wonderful, I love that you used the word magical earlier, because while my work is evidence-based, there's so much about sleep that is magical and that is transcendent that we don't really fully understand, but the essence is that it's absolutely so healing for the body and so supportive.
So where can people find you, Suzie? Where would you like them to go if they like to know much more about you?
So I have a website. It's my name. It's Suzie, SUZIESENK.com. And you can find out lots of information about me there. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn. So all those ways, you just Google my name and you'll find me.
Perfect. And there was so many goosebump moments for me today. So I am going to invite you to come to our little forest in India to do yoga together. Or I'm going to visit you on that island, and so that we can take a walk there together. Great to have you, Suzie. I really wish this episode we had more time, because it's just been as if I've been looking in the mirror and chatting with myself. So it was wonderful from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed the show. Just a reminder that this podcast is for information purposes only. This is not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or otherwise qualified health professional. This information is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. If you are looking for personal help on your health journey, do seek out a medical practitioner. Please do make your own healthcare decisions based upon your research and in partnership with your doctor or otherwise qualified healthcare professional. It is in no way intended as medical advice, as a substitute for medical counseling, or as treatment or cure for any particular health condition. Be sure to always work directly with a qualified health practitioner before making any changes to your diet or lifestyle that may feel out of your realm of comfort or understanding. If you are looking for an allied functional medicine practitioner, do seek out more information on www.phytothrive.com or www.sleepwhisperer.pro. It is important that you have someone who is qualified and understands your health personally in order to provide adequate care, especially when it comes to chronic health conditions.